Hello, everyone. It's been a minute. This is Channel
Hi.
BK. Thanks for tuning in. That's Joshua Kirk. I'm Brian. This is Channel BK. What's on repeat? We're back. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like every time I do the intros, I'm always like, "Hey, what's our blah blah blah?" This is gonna be chill. It's gonna be chill this time. New year, same old shtick. We're gonna talk about some singles and albums that we've been listening to. We went through a whole year. We did our lists, which you can check both of those out on both of our channels. Obviously, his stuff's in the description. You're already on my channel, and you can check all that out. But we're starting the year fresh. We're only doing one single to start off because there are still some albums that there's still some newer stuff coming out. There's a lot of stuff coming out in April and May. We don't have a lot of other big things
Oh
past
yeah,
that.
and also because we've list all the albums that are on our lists. We've each listened to all of them, so
Yes.
that basically gives us more time to talk about those.
But so Josh corrected me in the order, and if this ended up not being the order, it's whatever, because it's just we switch off every time. It's not a big deal. So Joshua, your single
Yeah.
is one that I feel like is, I'm not going to say is controversial for me, but it is very controversial due to what your anticipation for this album, because it seems like a lot of people are kind of not as excited for this new album as you are, which is
Yeah, it's the upcoming national record.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, they put out three singles in this album cycle so far, and the one I'm talking about here is the one that just dropped, Eucalyptus. It's the third track they've put out from this album, and it's kind of interesting what you were saying here about like people's anticipation for the national, because I have a weird relationship with this band. Like, I mean, I definitely think I've always respected them for how influential they've been for like indie music over the last 20 years. And like there's some albums of theirs that I do really like Boxer, for example. That's easily, I think, my favorite of theirs. But then there's other albums of theirs that I was into at one point, but now for whatever reason I'm not super interested to go back to. Like Sleep Well Beast, for example, their 2017 album. Like the year that came out, that was like my album of the year. But like as time went on, it kind of drained on me a little. And by the time I had graduated high school, I was like, the National aren't really for me anymore. Around that same time, they put out I Am Easy to Find, which I actually haven't listened to that album, but now I'm kind of curious to go back and listen to that before this new album, because is it's not until late April that this album drops, so I've got time. Um, but this run of singles they've had has been, I think, really strong in my opinion. Like Tropic Morning News was great. I had that song on here for a little while, but
Mm-hmm.
given that I haven't listened to it a lot lately, yeah, it made sense. Like given that this song is still kind of fresh and it just dropped, I figured it would make more sense to just talk about this. New Order T-shirt is a good song too. But Eucalyptus, man, like I'm not gonna spoil too much because I know you're kind of waiting for the album to hear these songs, but like um
I did
this song.
listen to this one though. I did listen to it mainly because it was on your list. I've listened to bits of the other two, and I will say, if this gives you any kind of warmth, I didn't like the what I heard of the first two. I actually thought this song was not that bad. I actually kind of dug it. I don't love it, but I do think with this new kind of 808y poppy sounding kind of thing that they're doing with this album, for what it seems like, this is the best that they did it. So
Yeah,
I do agree. I do like the song. I don't love it, but
yeah. They yeah, like I've really enjoyed all the singles, weirdly enough, and I think there's just a great balance on this track of like it's like very somber and melancholy, kind of like what you would expect. But there's more of a punch to it that I feel like has kind of been missing a little from some of these some of their more recent albums. Like we haven't really heard the National this immediate since like High Violet or something like that. And I just think I just love how passionately the song is really delivered with like the performances and like Matt's vocals, and I love the kind of the climax near the end. I think is cool, and yeah, it's like does a good job being like very like emotional and kind of there's a little more life to it, I think. And I could definitely say the same about those last couple of singles. And in a way, I think they're pulling off this like 808 sort of thing better than they did on a Sleep Well Beast. Because yeah, that album isn't necessarily their worst, but I think does have some of the messiest production of any of their albums for sure. Um, but yeah, I have a feeling if the album is as good as like the singles, because I weirdly really like all of them, it should be one of their best albums in a while, and it should be like one of the better albums of the year. But then again, they were kind of bringing in more 808s on the newest Pup album, and yet that album wound up being really high on your list. So yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Let's
I
see if the same happens with the National.
I will say I have a weird relationship with the National too, because I've only really listened to their latest couple albums, and then like you, Boxer. Like you, I think they're one of those bands that I really like the stuff of theirs I like, but they're definitely not a band that's for me.
Yeah,
It's just not my thing. But I do think when they do things that are well that I like it. And I feel weird that I really enjoyed their last record. I was actually kind of shocked. I was not semi alone, because I think there was a consensus it was good, but I know a lot of people are kind of not as high on it. Um, but yeah, so I am excited though. I will say I maybe it'll be on your 3 months from now. We'll be talking about that album, so we'll see.
or
Uh
Jesse Ware because that comes out around the same time too.
I think those two albums are looking forward to be pretty good. I agree. I'm not talking about a Jessie Ware single though, because she has the Pearl song out, which is a great song. I'm talking about a song that is from a band that I've been recently getting into, and I don't think this is a band that Josh really has a lot of like, because I knew when I put this song on here, he was probably gonna think like, who? Like, what are these guys? The song is
Heard of them.
okay.
I'm not totally in the blind.
So the band is Hot Mulligan. The song is Shh, Golf is On. They're very well known for having like very quirky, not like Fall Out Boy, where their songs are like a whole sentence and you're like, why is this the song title? But they have very quirky song titles. They're basically a pop punk band. Um, I've only been recently getting into them from their last album. I think their last album is pretty good. I like the approach to how they do songs, and they kind of it definitely rides the line of like they're more in that. Again, we like to talk about how pop punk is separated, where there's these new pop punk artists, but then there's like the Warped Tour style pop punk, and they're definitely in that camp. But a lot of what they do reminds me like there's some kind of like screamo in it, not really like but like the main singer, like he doesn't sing completely, he's kind of shouts his vocals.
Like
I do
Touche
see,
Amore or
yeah, like
something.
Touche Amore. I see some like some Jeff Rosenstock in there too, just sonically. Like it's like heavy and like darker and like messier. Like it's not as like well put together. And some of it is very like musically fun. This song is dark and it's heavy. The drums and the guitar are intense, and it's definitely a different song from what they were doing their last album. And again, I'm coming into this as a newbie because I've never really listened to this group. And this song, when I saw it was coming out, I'm like, okay, I'm going to jump on this cycle. I'm going to get into this album. I'm going to listen to it when it comes out. And so when I heard this song, I was like, okay, this is really good. It's intense. I think the vocals are really well done. The layering of them is great. And again, it's a much heavier sounding song from them. So I
Yeah,
am
now I'm kind of interested because I mean, you know me, I tend to be a little hit or miss with the style of pop punk. And originally I was kind of like, but I am gonna go listen to it, yeah, in honor of you, because it sounds like more something a bit more up my alley, I think.
Yeah, I would say so. It definitely, like I said, their last record was it wasn't like catchy, but it was much catchier than this. But this song has those catchy elements. Like, again, it's not like you mentioned Touche Amore. I think that's a good comparison, but you're not going to go into it and he's going to be like it's not even like that intense. It's very much like, I don't know how to explain it. Like I said, it's just, I think once you experience it, you'll understand. And I think, like you said, I think you will dig it. So I appreciate it, but I'm excited for their album. But it's okay because their album is not here, just like the National. We got to wait a little bit for those two. But guess what? We have albums we need to talk about and can talk about now. And Josh has a really nice segue because he put my first record to his, well, to him, it's technically his right side. How I'm looking at him, it's in how you're all looking at him, it's to his left side. And that is Heavy Heavy by Young Fathers. I feel like if you have ever been watching this channel or know me or whatever, you know that Young Fathers is like one of my groups. They are one of like I love talking about them. I love if they do Lucy's, if they do an album, like they're just one of those groups that like I've become such a huge fan. And this album was something that I was finally so excited about. I'm like, yes, we're gonna get a Young Fathers album. And I will say, and I know we've talked about it a little bit, my hype of this album has been a roller coaster because it started here, it kind of went to here, but it's kind of come back a little bit. So I feel like I wish the album was slightly longer. And I definitely feel like there's a couple little instances that make the album semi-inconsistent. But overall, if I had to compare this album to their discography, you look at what they've done. You look at Dead. That album was expansive, a lot of songs, but it was very kind of clean produced. There was some like dark lo-fi rapping on it. Their second album, which is, in my opinion, their magnum opus, White Men Are Black Men Too, was kind of the same kind of record, but it was more gritty, in your face, dark. There was more singing. It was definitely a flip of that album. Cocoa Sugar, I felt like was Dead, but in a more minimal way. I really like Cocoa Sugar, though. Dead is really their only album of theirs I've always been like kind of hit or miss with. This album reminds me of Cocoa Sugar. It's a little stripped back, it's minimal, but it's not airy and atmospheric. It's heavy, it's in your face, and it's so much fun and yet so uplifting. Something like Rice, which is
kind of like the title, Heavy Heavy.
and that was the thing that I was excited about, which I will say this, it wasn't exactly what I was thinking of, like heavy, especially from I Saw. But it's still pretty damn great. And like, so with Rice, the sound of it being like, it sounds like you're out on like the water trying to fish. Like it has like that fun vibe. I love the drum pattern on it. It's fantastic. And I love the vocals on it. I need to catch more fish, baby. I need to eat more rice.
Boom, boom,
like
boom, boom.
It's a great start to the album. I Saw as a song
These
that
hands can heal. These hands can heal. Yeah,
I could talk about every song on this album for so long, but I will say I Saw is still as fantastic as the first time I talked about it. Drum, again, was a song I went into thinking like, okay, it's going to be one thing. And then it's actually the opposite. It's this hypnotic, like, ooh. And then I love the approach to the vocals on here and the way it builds at the end. We Get to Tell Somebody, which I think is a song that's grown on me. I don't love it, but I think it's a nice little kind of like, it fits well going through the album. And I like it still. Geronimo, I loved when it first came out. Still love it. Shoot Me Down is the most unique song I think they've ever done. This is the most experimental song. The sampling and the 808 beat at the beginning, the way it builds.
Back off.
It builds every part. Like it builds like the do 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 do, and then it builds the doom, and then it builds the boom, 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 and then it builds, and I think it works. And once the vocals come in and the piano's near the end, it's gorgeous. Sink or swim. Oh baby, won't you let me in? My mind is saying, sink or swim. Like again, it's catchy, it's fun, it's in your face. Holy Moly is a solid song. I think this is a song that's definitely grown on me. It reminds me a lot of like maybe second album where it's very dark, very lo-fi and compressed. It's in your face. And I like it. I will say Be Your Lady. It started off so strong. So strong. And then I don't even know what happens in that second half of the song with the weird like beat that doesn't work. It doesn't fit. I don't know. And that's kind of where I come to where I'm like, this is where you end the album. And then you sit there going, the album's honestly pretty good, but it ends on such a poor note. And it reminds me, it's obviously this album's better. It reminds me of the last Alex Cameron record where I just felt like the record was on such a strong run and then it just kind of fumbles at the end. And I'm like, what was the point of this song? And so at the end of the day,
and you didn't mention Ululation,
which
that was
I like the sound of it. I like the vocals to it, but again, it was one of those I've been waiting so long. I wanted another Young Father song, and it just was. It felt like another filler, and that's the thing. Like, tell somebody.
It definitely grew on me the more
I do think it sounds good. I think the sound of it is fantastic. It's just I wish it just felt like another like transitional kind of mood song, and I'm like, I don't know. But again, overall, I think it's a great album. I think it's fantastic. I still love that they're bending the sound and making their own sound and being unique, and it's fantastic. I love it. So for this next one, let me get this long ass title out of the way, shall we? So praise the Lord who chews but which does not consume, or simply hop between worlds. Eve's tumor. First off, screw you. Because come on now, like just give me something short. I guess I could have just said the first part. Eves is an artist that I know. I feel like we probably talked about him on this show possibly before, or
I don't think we have. I mean, I think the conversation we had about like him just recently was probably the first true one we had about his music.
But I know we've talked about them like a lot, like you said recently, because we've been discussing their last albums. And 2 albums ago, I really enjoyed it. Last record, I was kind of like on the fence, but I was still pretty okay with it. Honestly, this record, again, I think it's definitely one of those it's died a little bit, but not like a lot. I think this is the most consistent record that I've heard this year. It's so well put together. I think the flow on the record is fantastic. I think the way these interludes come through and just the diversity of the sounds on here, it's fantastic. God is a circle. The way that starts the whole entire album, definitely.
It opens with that scream, and it just like it goes from there.
And it's minimal, and it's so minimal, just that doon 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 doon, and it's just that one snare tap, and it fits. And then Lovely Sewer, which is such a funny name for a song. And then Catalina, and then the way that woman's vocals, and I know y'all gonna hate me. I swear it was Lady Gaga. I was like, Lady Gaga's on the song. What the hell's happening?
I don't know who that is. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I'm annoyed that I didn't do that. But the way her vocals come in are fantastic. Meteora Blues is this like Bowie-esque track with the acoustic guitar and the way the drums come in. Heaven Surrounds Us Like a Hood.
I think favorite song of the year so far for me.
Favorite song of the year. My favorite song on this album is definitely In Spite of War. I love that. I love the build on that. I like that was fantastic.
Fear, something like
so good. Fear, Evil Like Fire, I think is fantastic. Purified by the Fire I don't know what about that song is chilling, but the way it sounds like an old school video game like song with the muffled kind of the I was like, you and I know this conversation. There's times where instrumental tracks can get me, or I'm like, okay, I get it. That song, the way it leads into Ebony Eye
Oh my
is
god, killer way to
is
close the album.
is killer. And that last song is just a fantastic way to end the album. It's
Like I was listening to this album a little earlier today uh, to kind of refresh myself on it a little bit, and yeah, I'm kind of I got on the Eve's Tumor wave with Heaven to a Tortured Mind, which in a way was kind of their breakthrough. And I did like the album, didn't love it as much as most people, but
mhm.
yeah, I thought they had potential to do something cool. And uh I don't know if you've heard he did an EP in 2021 that was kind of cool too. That
Cool.
the Asymptomatic World. Um but like this album, I do agree with you. This is like easily his best album, and I so far that is. And yeah, it's definitely one of those records where yeah, I I've needed a little bit of time for it to marinate, but yeah, it's definitely pretty high on my pretty high on my list this year. And feel like this really does feel like the future of like pop or rock music right here. Like kind of similar to another band that we're gonna get into a little later, I think.
No, and I think what's so great about this record is they're taking that kind of glam rock, space rock sound.
There's even points that reminded me of like post-punk revival, like In Spite of War or like Fear Evil Like Fire. I could see a band like Block Party or Interpol doing something like that.
Well, like the way that they structured this album is I feel like every one of their albums has definitely been like one kind of thing. And their last record was a lot more glam rock and it had kind of the more poppy aesthetic to it. This album feels like it's that, but bringing that like darkness and that in that kind of creepiness. And like you said, a lot of those post-punk stuff that the record before that brought. And I think the combination is fantastic. And it's a chilling listen, but it's a gorgeous listen, and they do it so well.
Oh yeah, and they actually feel like songs here, because one of my issues of their last album was that some tracks felt more like a really good idea that wasn't fully fleshed out. Like especially near the end, that album definitely fell apart a little for me. But this album is like it's like more it's definitely catchier, and yeah, the songs definitely feel yeah, it's definitely a more like complete sounding album, I think.
I agree. Very great album. But now to my final record. If you are my age and I were to say this name, you would think that we're back in high school because this is the last time I feel like this person was so popular and so relevant. He has done obviously stuff in the decades since, and it's not like he's not like unknown, but I think just saying his name, like as a, oh, he has an album, you're like, really? Huh? Skrillex, Quest for Fire. This is a guy that blew up in the 20 teens. And when I was in high school, everyone would not shut up about scary monsters and nice sprites. It's his EP that blew him up. And it's one of those things where at the time I liked what he was doing, but I was definitely like, this is stupid, whatever. And again, once I've been able to sit back and really see the trajectory of Skrillex, Sonny Moore, Mr. Sonny Moore, once I've been able to be like more of an adult music listener, I do think he gets a lot of crap. I do think some of the stuff he did was dated because obviously dubstep is like
Oh yeah, he
dead.
definitely.
It's
I mean,
gone.
I've never really listened to a full project of his, but I'm well aware that he like popularized that whole like bro step kind of subgenre.
Yeah. And it's like, whether you like it or not, I think he is definitely one of these guys that he popularized certain things that maybe aren't the greatest, but I still think he was very talented. And Quest for Fire, to me, feels like I had a really good analogy before coming in here, but it's like when you listen to his older stuff, he's a young guy making this, yes, oh my gosh, wah, 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 wah,
Well,
wah, wah.
well, I mean, there's even like songs in like hip hop or something that remind me of Skrillex, like in Sicko Mode, the Travis Scott song, the whoa,
Mhm.
whoa, whoa. And spoiler, one of the albums on my list actually kind of sounds like that song a little too. Uh,
Like, he's very influential for good things, for bad things, whatever. And I think a lot of it was he was that popular artist. But listening to this, it sounds like he is a mature electronic music listener. Now, I will say, I did not listen to his other album. I was told by you, and I saw other reviews that said avoid it. So I have not listened to it. So I'm not here to be negative about Skrillex. I'm here to talk about the album that I think the most stuck in my head. I've been listening to this album so much. It's so mature. The way he builds his drops on this album are so like not like when he would do drops, his way of doing it and the way dubstep was is it would build, 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 and then it would be like this obnoxious audio snippet, like the thing that I just did. That was the biggest song in his career where it was like, yes, oh my gosh. That's how he used to make songs. And it was so grating. The drops on here are so effortless. They're so well done. He's doing so many different kinds of sounds on here, and it just sounds like such a refined album. That's so nice to hear from him, considering he came from one style that popularized him. Now he's putting out an album that has nuance of a like Porter Robinson, who is on this album. Like
or
you
Flume.
or Flume. Like, I think Flume is probably the best example because Flume is not a
And how is he
trendsetter.
not? How is he not on this album? Because I think him and
That would have been
Skrillex would produce
awesome.
something cool.
No, I agree because like obviously we've seen him do stuff with Diplo over the years. Like I knew they did that Justin Bieber song, the Where Are You Now? They've done stuff like that. I know he's produced for like ASAP Rocky on his debut album. He's done other stuff, but Flume is a good comparison because Flume is not the biggest innovative artist, but he is pretty innovative in a way. He does certain kinds of EDM, but he does it in a unique way and he's moving forward a certain sound. This album to me, I think it definitely again tapers off slightly, even though the last song on here is fantastic. But I'm going to tell you right now, as I look at this list, up until basically like Good Space, I was just
or like
yes,
the weird little interlude that was just like a
the Warped
snippet from
Tour.
a Warped Tour Pete Wentz interview. Yeah, it was odd.
This album, dog, I'm telling you, I was up cleaning the house and I was just going around the kitchen like doing this. It's from Leave Me Like This, the way it builds and the way, oh my God, that bass drop, dude, is like the most like the house influence that's on this album. The like, again, just what we've been seeing in the last decade. Because again, ever since Skrillex became popular, we're seeing multiple sides of EDM. We see like a Nicholas Jar, Porter Robinson. Obviously Daft Punk was before that, but when they came back with Random Access Memories, we got like, but in a way, we have like a Zed or a Chainsmokers, right? Like, and I'm not saying these guys to be like funny or anything. I'm being like, this is all that we've kind of seen that has become a thing since this. And to see Skrillex kind of come in being who he is and be like, okay, I'm an OG. Like I'm legit a legend. Like I'm as much as like I got shit on when I first came out, I'm pretty dope. And like, especially when you get a song like Rat-ta-ta-ta, dog,
This is kind of beat the go rat-ta-ta, rat-ta-ta, rat-ta-ta.
This song, when I saw Missy Elliott and the moment the beat started, I said, this is the most genius thing that Sunny did. Like, yes, this is a beat made for her. And she just flowed on this song. She was just, it was effortless. It was fucking effortless. I was like, holy shit. Tears, fantastic. Rumble, awesome. Fucking, we get, oh my God. I feel like I'm going to go on so much. Xena, I
Oh
believe,
my god.
is what the fuck? Like, oh,
Gotta. Those drum edits, like, I have no words.
I will say though,
Fucking incredible.
the one song I have in my head is the Too Bizarre Juked, because all I have in my head, I have Sway Lee's chopped up part in my head. I just play that sometimes and just kind of put up in that bit.
Let's put down. This is too bizarre. I love things how they are.
We can't sit here and listen to this record and just think, oh, this is some great fun dance bit. Like, this is so well done. It is so intricate, and just the layers, and just, I think this album may be one of my top albums of the year by the time we get back here, like in December, because this is an album I keep listening to, and I just keep finding certain things about it. And again, it's like, this album did not have to be this great. And again, I'm talking about Quest for Fire. I'm not talking about Don't Get Too Close or whatever, because we ain't going to talk about that. We're talking about this album.
Avoid that album, people. I had to listen to that.
This album is fantastic. Some great EDM for the year. And yeah, yeah. So I'm very excited to talk about your 3 albums, because I believe that the 3 albums that you have are some pretty good albums.
Yep. Well, I feel like my first album is the one that, like, yeah, if I hadn't spread the word about this band to Brian, he probably wouldn't have listened to them. But they're a little post-punk band from the UK, because we have a lot of those now. Shame, Food for Worms. So for you, this is like your first time listening to them. Well, for me, I got into them with Drunk Tank Pink, which was one of my favorite albums of 2021, and it was just straightforward, in your face, well written and performed post-punk. And they feel kind of interesting within the post-punk canon, because they're definitely not like Squid or Viagra Boys or Black Country New Road. I mean, I know Black Country's kind of in a different realm now, but like, these bands tend to play post-punk in a way that's very experimental, avant-garde.
You know
And
who I
even
got? You know who I got from this album? And you know what? This is really the reason why I really enjoyed it. And it reminded me more of their newer album a little bit. I got a lot of Ice Age. Like, especially with like the last song. It reminded me of like something that would be on Take Shelter, because that was definitely their more like, they were kind of going for a little bit of a certain cleaner aesthetic on there. I got, because when I listen to Ice Age, I feel like I am in a murky bar at like 2 a.m, and there's this band on stage, half out of it, like, that's how I got from this album. It's
the people,
like
that.
it's murky, and it sounds really raw, and it sounds like in the moment, and that's why I really enjoyed it, is because it reminded me of Ice Age. That was the main, like, oh shit, like, this is awesome, because that's what I got the moment I listened to it. So that's why I really liked it.
But yeah, like, the interesting thing with me in this album is, I mean, I liked all the singles, and I'd say they've grown on me a little since hearing them on the album. I will say their last album singles hit me a little more, but like, as a whole, I think this is my favorite thing they've done so far. Like, another, I guess, kind of cleaner song I want to highlight that's amazing on this thing is Adderall, which that I mean, when I heard that song as a single, I was kind of like, okay, this is cool. now when I hear it, like I legit sing along to the chorus a lot of the time. The way it's like hetero, like the way that the anthemicness contrasts with the kind of low key verses, and like the lyrics on it are very like depressing, but also kind of hopeful. I think the breakdown near the end is cool, and if you Brian, if you heard a faint little background vocal at the midpoint, a lot of people haven't been talking about this, but apparently that is none other than my bestie, Phoebe Bridgers, making a little cameo there.
She's just everywhere.
Yes. Um, and then like Six Pack, that's probably the biggest curveball on this album because uh, it definitely has that post punk feel like in the vocals and like the lyrics, but the riff on it is like bluesy and a little psychedelic, and it's kind of funny how it definitely sounds like maybe like an old school like Smith song a little bit, or even like Talking Heads, but like the riff on it's just like whenever the bound it, the bound it, the bound it, the bound, and like I have had that stuck in my head for a little while. Alibis is definitely like the most aggressive track on here in terms of just the way it's performed, and the chorus is just like Jack says he loves me. I question that. I question that. I question that. I question that. Like post punk gold right there. Orchid, I think, is a really good attempt at an acoustic ballad, and I think it's a nice little break to the album because like the first half of this album, even though there's definitely slower builds and a little more length to the songs than there was on their last album, it's still generally pretty in your face. This track
Hmm.
is, yeah, kind of a little breather, except for the outro, which is just like bum, 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 and they kind of bring you back into the heat again. Um, and some of the final moments on here, like Burning by Design, just and the way he's singing on it is like so emotional. The way it's like, I when the fear when it comes, it's always raw, and you don't mention. I don't care about the songs that use these chords. Like, and like the outro is great. Different person, I think, has really grown into one of my favorite tracks on here. Like, I just love kind of the eeriness of it, and the bass line on it's really cool. And like kind of that more psychedelic second half, the way it just slides into it is fantastic. And yeah, the like the outros, really the outros for every song on here is like, yeah, incredible. And yeah, I don't even have to talk that much about the last song because you already highlighted it. But yeah, definitely, it's oddly a very it ends the album on kind of a beautiful and touching note, even though it still has that kind of like that kind of like dingy post punk kind of
Hmm.
energy coming off of it. And yeah, um I really love this album. Like, there's not really a single track on it I disliked. I mean, I do think the intro on Yankees, which is early on in the album, drags a little bit, but once the song really gets going, it's great. But really, that's just me nitpicking because yeah, I really enjoyed this record, and yeah, it's likely gonna yeah, it's already pretty high on my list for this year. So there you go. Great album. But my next album, I know some people may be a little bit shocked to see an album like this being talked about on What's on Repeat, because this particular album is not one you just go and listen to. And but dare I say it, it may be my favorite album of the year so far. Um, and that is Algiers with Shook. Um, it's kind of yeah, it feels odd that I'm going out on a limb saying like I love this album because yeah, this record I needed time with this for this album to really come together for me because the first time I listened to this, it didn't click with me. Um, I mean, I definitely at the time like I've always respected this album for how like ambitious and how they're like really going for it on here, but like yeah, I don't know. But then after hearing you listen to it and really liked it, I became curious. I'm like, okay, now I'm kind of curious to see if it grows on me. And I listened to the album like like I've listened to this album like 4 times all the way through. That's how many listens I've needed for it to really like, I guess, reveal itself to me.
Well,
But
coming off of their last record too, I agree, because their last record is probably their most not well, I guess accessible. I think it was their most.
definitely they're most accessible, but like, yeah, that it was a little bit, yeah, disappointing that they played it so safe on there.
That's a better way to say it. It like it felt a little more safe. It felt more like things you kind of knew they did. It wasn't terrible, but it definitely was like, okay. Whereas this record, like you said, I just kind of remember being like, I started listening to it. I'm like, oh, okay, this is not gonna be like their last record, because their last record I felt like is easily their most easy like to just digest. Whereas this one, maybe their most complicated. It's like you said, it's very experimental in the way that I feel like with past albums, they incorporate a lot of different styles, but it works for the songs, and the songs feel like normal songs and it all works. This album is like, we're going to take everything, and every song is going to have something different going on. The songs are going to have like ideas that are clashing against each other,
Yeah, and
but
some
they
of them
work.
aren't even songs. Like there's
No, like
like
the interludes.
a good like I'd say 20% of the album is interludes, something like that, which I will say originally I kind of had a problem with how just sort of sporadic the album felt when I first listened to it. And I was kind of like, I think they're overdoing it with the interludes. But like now, with all the time that I've spent with it over the past month, this album, even though it is eclectic, it actually still has a really cool flow to it. And the interludes, I actually think, this is one of those rare albums where if I were listing out my favorite tracks, there'd probably be 2 or 3 interlude tracks I'd put under there, probably. Um, Now, as for like songs, Irreversible Damage is fantastic. Easily my favorite single from this album cycle. Zach from Rage Against the Machine kills it. Fight Back was a song that I was a little on the fence with when I heard it as a single, but as I expected, it's really grown on me a lot. Like it's multi-phased, and Franklin really is very versatile as a performer here because he's like
Mm-hmm.
kind of he's singing in parts, rapping in others, kind of doing a little. He opens it on kind of a spoken word note, and Billy Woods and Backwash, as expected, killed it with their verses, which yeah, frankly, I think are the best part of the track. Um and like there's longer songs on the second half that took a little getting used to, but now I love. Like Green Iris, for example. Like that song is like haunting and moody and soulful and just it's kind of hypnotizing the way it's like and it like kind of puts you in a trance and like and then there's that little like techno portion like right at the end which originally yeah I wasn't crazy about how this and Something Wrong are like 2 tracks on the second half where um like majority of the song is one thing but then like the end of it could have very well been another song and initially I was just kind of thrown off by that but now I actually kind of dig that and it actually like it's kind of clunky but yet it still kind of works at the same time because like Something Wrong like it's kind of cool how like majority of the song is like a slowed down version of the mix. Like you hear it just kind of regular speed, and then like about a minute in, they just all of a sudden, they make it sound like very like more psychedelic, I guess, in a way. And then like the end of it's just like that's a bite back, and they're just straight up in your face, which um The song "A Good Man" is definitely in that territory. "I Can't Stand It" with Sam Herring of Future Islands. I really liked that one. Has kind of It's kind of an old school like hip hop flavor to that beat. And yeah, I really like it. And like Cold World, I think is probably my favorite track on here. I just love the urgency to it, the intensity in its performance, and even that little like kind of like with Xena on the Skrillex album, they kind of do a little bit of a like cross cultural fusion like at the midpoint of the song, and it like is actually well executed. Like it doesn't come off tacky or something like that. And like the one song on here that I think is the most obviously like kind of out there would have to be Out of Style Tragedy, which is kind of a song, but also kind of like this very abstract spoken word piece. But like there's little details in this track that are pretty easy to pick out, like the jazz instrumentation, the chant like group vocals, and kind of the layers of effects and stuff like that. Like it's definitely it oddly kind of reminds me a bit of like the experimental portions on like I know this may be a kind of controversial comparison, but like Boarding House Reach, the Jack White album, that album had moments where it was kind of a song, but for the most part, just kind of this like abstract experimental jam.
Yeah.
Yeah. This it oddly kind of reminds me of this a little bit. So it makes sense to me that I mean, obviously the discourse surrounding that Jack White album was a lot louder for sure, but this is definitely kind of like that in that it's been a kind of divisive album, I feel like. Which given that they're trying something different, I kind of get it, but like I feel like this is I feel like this is an album where if you're not really feeling it on the first listen, I highly recommend go back, spend a little more time with it. Chances are it'll reveal itself to be like because it certainly revealed itself to me as like a very powerful and awe-inspiring album. And but something maybe even more controversial is that I think this may be my favorite Algiers album so far. Like, I mean, I love Underside of Power. That's one of my favorite albums of the 2010s for sure. But like, I feel like this is the most complete sounding Algiers record. And I kind of feel like you could look back on their older stuff and feel like they're definitely, this is opening doors for something truly unique. And I feel like all the doors have pretty much been opened with this album. And yeah, I love it. And I oddly kind of like it sometimes when music is simultaneously like music you enjoy listening to, but also kind of like work at the same time. I mean, there's not much about this album that isn't different from, say, like maybe a Billy Woods or an Arm& and Hammer record, something like that, which is ironic because Billy Woods himself does appear on this album. Um, but like, yeah, I really liked this album, and it was totally worth putting in the work to really like let it sink in. Um, but my final album, I pretty much right out of the gate on this next one was like, oh yeah, they're back. Um, and of course, I'm spoiling it because I have the vinyl right in front of me, and it's 100 gex with 10,000 gex. Um,
Frog on the floor. Where'd it come from? Nobody knows.
oh yeah, because apparently,
Nobody.
but yeah, apparently 1,000 gex wasn't enough. They needed 9,000 more to help them make this record. Anyway, so this album feels interesting to me because their debut, right, was like one of the most one of the wildest, most chaotic, and in a way, like polarizing albums of
Mhm.
2019. Like, even some of the early reviews of that album, I remember were like, I don't know if this is supposed to be good or bad, but it's still kind of cool and unique. But then by the end of the year, a lot of people were like, you know what? That's what makes them so special. And I know you and I, like, it kind of makes sense I Have Young Fathers and 100 gecs as the vinyl on display because they feel like obvious groups we like have been talking about since we like first met, something like that. But like this album, I feel like this record, it is definitely a 100 gecs album, but it kind of feels more adult like than their previous stuff.
They
Like,
feel like full songs. That's the one thing I noticed is it feels like this
oh yeah,
album is like every song is fleshed out.
because like I wrote down here that like there's a little more length, kind of like with Shane. There's a little more length to the songs,
Mm-hmm.
and there's definitely more meat to them. Whereas previous tracks of theirs, like half of it felt like a song, and then the other half were just these like chaotic, just brain assaulting genre clashes for sure. Um, and like there's definitely, even with the album being as short and as like minimal as it is, like it's still got a nice variety to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
you'll get kind of normal songs like Hollywood Baby, which I mean that is, it definitely has their usual flair like in the songwriting and the blown out production, but like
Me is also a song that feels like that too.
oh yeah, which that song grew on me. Like when I heard it on
Mm-hmm.
as a single, I was kind of like, eh. I kind of still felt that way on my first couple listens, but on my most recent listen, I'm like, I mean, it may be familiar territory for them, but you know, that's really to say it's a banger.
I
And
agree. And I think after listening to the whole record and hearing the whole record be very different, that once you get to a song that kind of sounds like what you would think of them, it's a nice, like, way to cap the album off, you know? Like, it's kind of a fun, like, okay, cool. We got all the weird stuff. Let's just do a normal 100 Gex song for the ending. I am with you on that. I was like, okay, with this song. And then hearing it now on the album, I was like, oh, this is the perfect closer. I love it.
but yeah, yeah, and also like I mean, other songs you'll get something a little more like their older stuff, like Billy Knows Jamie, which kind of sounds like an old school new metal song,
Yeah, I was getting
but
like
with their own
Limp Bizkit or like Linkin Park. I was like,
or like
holy shit.
corn, something like
Yeah,
that.
I was like, whoa, what is happening?
Yeah, but like it still has that twist to it, and like the breakdown at the end is like, I mean, fun fact, some of the lyrics on some songs like 757 and this one, like they're a little different on the vinyl physical version of the album than they are like on streaming. Because like the the one on streaming has like Laura like rapping and stuff like that, and the breakdowns is like something like that. But like on the vinyl, there it's kind of cool. It's like her doing more like melodic, auto-tuned singing over top of it. I mean, obviously she still does a kind of like a little thing near the end,
Mm-hmm.
but like yeah, but then like other songs, you'll get kind of the best of both worlds, like Doritos and Fritos, which is very like catchy and fun, has a really sick bass line on it. The chorus just like the TV's turned the cable and I'm sleeping when I'm able. But then the post chorus just like goo 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 Doritos and Fritos, like, and just like Laura's performance on this track is like so charismatic. The way she's like, he said shit, all we got Doritos and Fritos. Then give me all of those fucking Doritos and like, and like, I think it's cool how a couple of days after the album dropped, I kind of did a little like deep dive into some of the lyrics on the album, uh and I kind of found out there's some stuff about like her coming out as a trans woman and stuff like that, on stuff like say Dumbest Girl Alive, and like, but then there's like other songs about kind of struggling to belong, like even Frog on the Floor, which is indeed kind of a silly random song about a frog, but like
But
it's
it's
also,
so perfect.
yeah, but it's also kind of about like kind of feeling like the odd one out
Mm-hmm.
at the party as well. And like and now we got to talk about kind of the elephant in the room with me for this album, which is I got my tooth removed.
Ska's back.
Like it's funny. I feel like I need to describe like my like first experience listening to this track because um I turned it on and I was kind of like, oh, were they gonna hit us with a ballad because of how like sentimental it sounds?
Yeah, and Dylan singing too.
And obviously that does not happen. Spoiler, for those who haven't heard it. But yeah, the moment I heard the "I got my tooth removed," I was like, oh my god, they're bringing ska back. Like I was, yeah, like my ears perked up a little bit listening to that part. I mean, I don't really get that. I mean, it has died on me a little since that first experience, because I've listened to it so much and I'm familiar with what it's doing, but still, like the song I think really captures the essence of ska really well. Which am I an expert on ska? No. Even though, but do I have bias against it? Absolutely no, for sure. But like it really does capture the basic elements of what make a great ska song where it's got the horns, it's got a great just sort of groove to it, and yeah, it's got this fun sort of carefree vibe to it, but like the lyrics are like, you know, about a very random situation that somehow like, you know, that's somehow like kind of depressing when you really like think about it, but it's like cool anyway because it's relatable and you could listen to it like say Jeff Rosenstock's ska flip of his latest album and be like, yeah, I've totally been there before for sure. uh but yeah, like this album is, it's kind of funny to me. Like, even though this definitely feels like a slightly more, I guess, normalized 100 gex, um, it still is kind of ambitious. They're making an album like this. Because like, I mean, for one, they're not really chipmunking their vocals on this album for
Mm-hmm.
one. And like it's kind of cool to hear like Laura's voice like not pitch shifted because it kind of adds to, yeah, she's a little more upfront about like her experience and stuff like that. And
And more comfortable too,
oh
which
yeah,
is
because
nice.
like I learned that that was the reason why she used to chipmunk her vocals, because yeah, it was clear that she was still maybe coming to terms a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. But yeah, but yes, shout out to 100 gex. They're cool, they're awesome, and they are 2 for 2 with these 3 albums. I guess they're gonna have to name their next record 100,000
Thousand
gex.
gags, and then it's gonna be a million gags, 10 million gags, 100 million gags, a billion gags.
Oh my
They're gonna
god,
keep going, and then by a certain point, their album title is just gonna be a number this long, or like to the 20th power or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
What's on repeat is back, and let me just tell you, I'm very happy with the 6 albums we talked about. These
Oh
are 6
yeah,
very good albums, and you should listen to all of them. And even if you don't like them, just give them a shot. I think they're all really great and very diverse set of albums as well. Um, you already know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. Check out the man Joshua Kirk. As always, Joshua, you are the greatest co-host on this channel for
yeah.
this show. I appreciate it, and look forward to more stuff from us this year, both channels and with what's on repeat. So until next time, thank you all so much for watching, and thank you for tuning in to Channel BK. Peace out, everyone.